The number was $23,400. I know it exactly because I wrote it myself, on a cashier's check in the registrar's office 3 days before I was supposed to leave for college. I had saved it over 4 years of weekends and summer shifts and one Christmas where I asked for nothing but a savings bond. My parents handed it back to me on a Tuesday in an envelope with a post-it note that said "For your future." I thought they meant mine. I was 18 years old the week I learned what my parents believed a daughter's future was worth compared to a son's vision. That is what this story is about. Welcome back to Family Revenge Stories New, the channel where quiet people keep the receipts and family learns that boundaries have a price. If stories about dignity, documents, and the compound interest of consequences are your thing, drop a comment and subscribe. We're just getting started. I am a forensic accountant. I have been one for 11 years now, and before that I was an accounting student, and before that I was the girl at the kitchen table who balanced the household books because no one else would. I started doing it when I was 14, not because anyone asked but because I noticed. The cable bill paid twice. The insurance premium 3 weeks late. My brother's car insurance filed under my mother's name because his was too expensive. I noticed all of it. I wrote it down. That is the thing about people who count for a living. We don't stop counting when we go home. We can't. The numbers follow us into every room, and they tell us things people would rather we didn't know. My profession is not a detail about me. It is the lens through which I have always seen my family, and the lens through which this entire story will be visible to you by the time we are done. My name for the purposes of this story is Miriam. My brother's name is David. Our parents were Esther and Gerald, both retired teachers, which everyone always mentioned when describing them, as though education made cruelty impossible. David was 3 years younger than me and 3 times as loud. He had what my mother called presence and what I would call a talent for framing his needs as everyone else's responsibilities. He was not evil. I want to be precise about that because precision matters. He was not a monster. He was a man who had been told in 1,000 small ways over 20 years that the rules that applied to other people were formalities where he was concerned. He wanted to be an entrepreneur. He had wanted to be something new every 18 months since he was 12. A music producer, a restaurant owner, a tech disruptor, a real estate mogul. What he had, instead of any of those things, was my parents' belief in him. That belief was absolute. It was also, I would eventually learn, quite expensive. I had gotten into a good state university on partial merit scholarship. The remaining $23,400 per year was mine. Saved, documented, sitting in an account with my name on it. I had a plan. I had a spreadsheet. I had a move-in date. 8 days before that date, my mother called me into the kitchen. She was standing at the counter with her hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold. My father was at the table, looking at the tablecloth. That was the first number I noticed. 2 parents, 0 eye contact. My mother said that David had an opportunity, that a business partner had come through with a matching offer, but it expired Friday, that the family needed to come together. She used the word together. I asked her what she meant by together. She said the tuition account, the one I had built dollar by dollar since I was 14, would need to be redirected. Temporarily, she said. Just to bridge the gap. David would pay it back within a year. He had projections. He had a business plan. He had, she said, real momentum this time. I sat down. Not because I was asked to. Because the room had tilted. I asked her what would happen to my enrollment. She said I could defer a semester. Or take out loans. Students did it all the time. I was smart, she said. I would figure it out. The word figure landed on me like a stone. I did not cry. I pressed my thumbnail into my palm until I could feel the half moon it left, and I asked one more question. I asked when they had decided this. My father looked up from the tablecloth for the first time. He said David had come to them 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks. My move-in date was 8 days away. They had known for 2 weeks and said nothing. I went to my room. I opened my laptop. I documented the conversation, the date, the time, the exact words used, redirected temporarily, figure it out. I opened a new folder and named it with the date. My hands were entirely steady. That is the part one remember most. Not the feeling but the steadiness. The check was transferred out of my account on a Thursday. $23,400 exactly. I watched it leave in real time through online banking, the way you watch a light go out in a window across the street. I deferred enrollment. I took 2 jobs. I moved into my cousin's spare room. I started building again. I kept the original savings account statement, the one showing the balance the day before the transfer, in a folder labeled with that date. I would carry that folder for the next 9 years. David's company was called Elevate Solutions. He described it differently depending on who was asking: a consulting firm, a tech platform, a strategic advisory group. What I understood it to be, from the few times he explained it to me, was a business that helped other businesses unlock their potential, which is a sentence that contains no nouns. My parents gave him the $23,400. They also, I would later learn, refinanced a portion of their home equity line to give him an additional $40,000 over the following year. David matched none of it. The business partner with the expiring offer was never mentioned again. I did not know about the home equity line at the time. I was working doubles at a hotel front desk and taking online accounting courses at night. I did not know a lot of things. But I was counting even then. Always counting. 3 years later, I sat for my CPA exam. I passed on the first attempt. I took myself to dinner at a restaurant with cloth napkins and ordered a glass of wine I couldn't really afford and wrote the date in my journal. No one from my family called to ask how it went. I had not told them when the exam was. 5 years after the money was taken, I was a forensic accountant at a regional firm. I specialized in tracing assets in civil litigation, finding money that people had moved, hidden, or claimed didn't exist. I was good at it. I was good at it because I had spent my childhood watching the distance between what people said about money and what they actually did with it. 6 years after the money was taken, my grandmother died. Her name was Lenora. She was my father's mother, and she had been a quiet woman the way that certain rooms in old houses are quiet, not empty, but full of things you have to stand still long enough to see. She had never spoken to me about money. She had never spoken to me that I could recall about David. What she had done, every Christmas for 30 years, was press a card into my hand when no one was looking. Inside the card was always the same thing. A small amount of cash and a handwritten line. The line was always different. 1 year. A woman who keeps her own books keeps her own life. Another year. Quiet is not the same as gone. I had kept every card. They were in a shoebox in my closet, rubber banded by year. When Lenora died, I flew home for the funeral. I sat in the back of the chapel and watched my family perform their grief in the front rows. David's suit was new. My mother's flowers were elaborate. My father gave the eulogy and mentioned Lenora's generosity 4 times. 3 days after the funeral, I received a call from an attorney. His name was Mr. Calloway, and he asked if I could come into his office at my earliest convenience regarding the estate of Lenora Whitfield. I arrived at Mr. Calloway's office on a Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock. I wore a blazer. I brought a legal pad. The room was quiet and smelled like old carpet and coffee. Mr. Calloway was in his 60s, careful, unhurried. He set a folder on the desk between us. He said that Lenora had maintained a revocable trust for the last 12 years. The trust had been amended twice, once 6 years ago, and once 11 months before her death. He said the primary beneficiary had been changed in the final amendment. He slid a document across the desk. My name was on it. The trust held $218,000, accumulated over decades of careful investment from Lenora's teacher's pension, and a small inheritance she had received from her own mother. The original beneficiary had been my father, Gerald. In the amendment dated 11 months before her death, she had removed my father entirely and named me, specifically and by full legal name, as sole beneficiary. Mr. Calloway let me read it twice before he said anything else. Then he said there was also a letter. He handed me an envelope. My name on the outside in Lenora's handwriting. Inside, one page, both sides, in the same unhurried cursive she had used on 30 years of Christmas cards. I read the whole letter sitting in that chair. I will share one line with you now, because it is the line that has lived in my chest ever since. She wrote, I watched what they took from you and I watched you rebuild it without complaint, and I decided that was the kind of person who should be trusted with what I leave behind. I folded the letter. I placed it back in the envelope. Then I asked Mr. Calloway one question. Had anyone else been informed of the trust's contents? He said no. The trust was private. No disclosure was required until I chose to act. I thanked him. I drove home. I made tea. I read the trust document 3 more times with a yellow highlighter the way I read every document that matters. I found the clause that required a 6-month wait before full distribution, which gave me a timeline. I found the secondary provision, a contingency that named as alternate beneficiary in the event of my death, a non-profit literacy organization in Lenora's hometown. Lenora had thought of everything. I sat with the trust document and the letter side by side on my kitchen table until the tea went cold. Then I called Mr. Calloway's office and scheduled a follow-up. Then I called my own attorney. I did not call anyone in my family. The call came from David 8 days later. He was cheerful in the way people are cheerful when they believe they are about to receive something. He said he had heard from someone at the funeral home, through a family friend who had a connection, that Grandma had left a trust. He said Dad was asking questions. He said the family wanted to get together and talk through what Lenora would have wanted. I wrote down the time of the call. I wrote down the phrase talk through what Lenora would have wanted. I had learned professionally that people reveal their assumptions in their prepositions. He did not say learn what Lenora wanted. He said talk through, as if the outcome were negotiable, as if my grandmother's legal documents were a first draft subject to revision by committee. I told David I would think about it. For days after that, my mother called. She said they were having a family dinner Sunday. She said it would be good to be together during a difficult time. She said David had some thoughts he wanted to share. I said I would be there. I called my attorney that afternoon. I said, send the letters now. The letters were formal notice, drafted per Mr. Calloway's guidance, confirming the trust's terms and my status as sole beneficiary. They went to my father and to David, not as an ambush, as a courtesy, as the kind of courtesy that also happens to be legally documented. If you have ever watched people who couldn't find time for a birthday call suddenly clear their entire Sunday when money enters the conversation, you already know exactly where this is going. Stay with me. The family dinner was at my parents' house. I arrived at 6. I had a folder with me. Dark blue, the kind that closes with a clasp. I set it on the passenger seat of my car, and left it there when I went inside. The table was set for 6. My parents, David, his girlfriend Kayla, my Aunt Patricia, and me. Patricia was my father's sister. She had an opinion about everything and a stake in nothing, which made her the family's ideal spokesperson. Dinner was lamb chops and roasted potatoes, my grandmother's recipe, and the irony of that was not lost on me. The conversation for the first hour was careful. Grief, work, weather. Kayla talked about a vacation she and David were planning. My father poured wine. My mother asked me twice if I was eating enough. Then Patricia set down her fork. She said, and I am quoting directly because I wrote it down in the car before I came inside. From the version I had rehearsed in my head, she said, "We all know why we're here." Lenora would have wanted the family to benefit together. That's just who she was. I nodded slowly. My father said that the trust was likely a formality, that surely the intent was always for the family. David said, and again I am quoting, "Look, I'm not trying to make this transactional, but I have some outstanding obligations right now with the business, and timing-wise, having access to even a portion of the inheritance would let me stabilize and actually protect everyone's interests long-term." The phrase "protect everyone's interests" sat in the air like a smell. I asked David one question. How is Elevate Solutions doing? He said it was in a growth phase, that revenue was restructuring, that the model had pivoted but the fundamentals were strong. I have been a forensic accountant for 11 years. I know what revenue is restructuring means. It means there is no revenue. I said, I see. I said, I'd like to share some things with you. The first document I placed on the table was a copy of Lenora's trust amendment. I said, this is the amended trust, dated 11 months before her death. I am named as sole beneficiary. The language is not ambiguous. The signature is notarized. There is no provision for family distribution, no language of intent beyond what is written, and no clause that invites reinterpretation. Patricia said that Lenora must have been confused, that the changes must have been made under pressure. I placed the second document on the table. It was a letter from Lenora's physician, dated 2 years before her death and retrieved from the estate file with Mr. Calloway's assistance. It confirmed Lenora's full cognitive capacity at the time of the amendment and noted her specific, documented wish to discuss estate planning at that appointment. My father said, Miriam, that's not what any of us are saying. I said, I know what you're saying. I want to make sure we're all working from the same set of facts. The third item I placed on the table was not a document. It was a single page of numbers. A timeline. 11 years of itemized family financial transactions as best I could reconstruct them from records I had obtained, accounts I had access to, and documents I had saved. $23,400. My tuition transferred to David's business account on August 14th of the year I was supposed to start college. $40,000. Additional funds from the home equity line, disbursed in 4 installments over the following year. A promissory note, handwritten, signed by David, promising repayment within 12 months, that I had found in my grandmother's personal papers, which Mr. Calloway had shared with me as executor. The note was 9 years old. It had never been repaid. I laid the promissory note on top of the timeline. David looked at it the way people look at something they had convinced themselves no longer existed. Kayla excused herself to use the restroom. She did not return. I said, my grandmother did not agree with that distinction. She kept very careful records. My mother's voice broke then. She said, she would have wanted us to be kind to each other. I said, she wrote down what she wanted. She was very clear. Then I reached into the folder one final time. I placed Lenora's letter on the table. I did not read all of it. I read one line. I watched what they took from you and I watched you rebuild it without complaint, and I decided that was the kind of person who should be trusted with what I leave behind. The table was entirely quiet. My Aunt Patricia looked at my father. My father looked at the promissory note. My mother looked at her hands. David, and this is the part one return to, the part one think about on the drive home from certain hard days. David put his face in his hands. Not in anger. Not in performance. He put his face in his hands and he was quiet for a long moment, and when he looked up, his eyes were red and he said, I should have paid you back. Not I'm sorry. Not I didn't know. Just I should have paid you back. I acknowledged that. I said yes. You should have. Then I closed the folder, I picked up my purse and I said good night. At the door I paused. I turned back to the table. I said, Elevate Solutions filed for dissolution with the state 3 weeks ago. I found the filing while I was reviewing documents. I thought you should know. Then I left. The trust distributed 6 months later, per the terms of the document, $218,000, minus legal and administrative fees, arriving in 2 installments. My father did not contest it. His attorney wrote a letter suggesting that the family had some concerns about the process, and Mr. Calloway wrote back a letter that was 11 pages long and so thoroughly documented that I understand the response to the response was a single sentence. The matter would not be pursued. David's company, Elevate Solutions, had indeed filed for dissolution. I had found the state filing while preparing for the dinner. Total documented liabilities at closure, $312,000, of which my parents had contributed over the years, a total of $63,400. None of it returned. The business partner who had started everything with the expiring matching offer was never found in any of the corporate records. I looked. David and Kayla broke up 2 months after the dinner. He moved back into my parents' house. He is, as of the last I heard, working in sales. He is good with people. He always has been. Patricia never spoke to me again. This was not a loss I catalogued in the negative column. My mother called me 4 months after the dinner. Not to apologize. To tell me she had found some of Lenora's jewelry, and did I want any of it. I said yes, I would like the small pearl earrings. She mailed them without a note. I wear them on days when I have to deliver findings in court. My father is the one I think about. He had one conscience moment at that table, I saw it. When he looked at the promissory note. When something moved across his face that was not defensiveness and not grief but something quieter than both. He has not called. I have not called. Some accounts, once reviewed, are simply closed. The $218,000 did not feel like winning. I want to be precise about that because precision matters, and imprecision about this particular thing would be a disservice to the story. I took $23,400, the exact original amount of my tuition down to the dollar, and I established a scholarship fund in Lenora's name at the university I eventually attended. It is not a large fund. It provides 1 renewable scholarship per year to a first-generation student in the accounting program. The selection criteria include, at my request, demonstrated financial independence. The first recipient was a 20-year-old from a small town who had worked summers since she was 15. I read her application at my kitchen table, and when I got to the part where she described her savings plan, I had to put the paper down for a moment. I know what I did with my hands in that moment. I pressed them flat against the table, feeling the surface of it, until I was ready to keep reading. The rest of the inheritance I invested carefully, the way Lenora would have wanted, with patience, with documentation, with the understanding that money watched over is not money hoarded. It is money that continues to mean something. Lenora's letter is framed on my desk. Not the whole letter, just the one line. I watched what they took from you and I watched you rebuild it without complaint, and I decided that was the kind of person who should be trusted with what I leave behind. The original savings account statement, The one showing the $23,400 balance the day before the transfer, dated the week I was supposed to go to college, is paper clipped behind the frame. You cannot see it from the front. I know it is there. That is enough. My family told themselves a story for 30 years. The story was that I was the one who would be fine, who was capable, who was resilient, who didn't need the same scaffolding as David because I could build my own. They were not wrong that I was capable. They were wrong about what that meant. She can handle it is not the same thing as she should have to. I know the difference between the two. I know it in my body the way you know things you have carried for a long time. I did not take my family's money. I received what my grandmother decided to give, documented in the manner she chose, executed in the process she established. There is nothing in that to apologize for and nothing in it to gloat about. I simply stopped absorbing a cost that was never mine to carry. They eventually learned what the difference looks like when it has a notary seal. If any part of this story reminded you that the people who are called capable are not the same as the people who should be endlessly asked to prove it, take that with you. Update the account. Review the terms. And if someone in your life has spent years being told they'll figure it out while someone else's vision gets funded, tell them I said to keep the receipts. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.